All right, guys. We're gonna go through all of public health and biostatistics, and I've tried my best to make this as simple as possible and help you remember all the formulas and stuff as well. Okay. So let's start with observational studies. Okay. So what I'm gonna use is the first aid and this book called Clinical Pattern Recognition. All right. Um, I've seen that this book has a lot of examples, so this will help you with questions and stuff. Okay. So first things first, what is a case series? You see, it's like a collection or review of cases. Okay, so you have a patient file, and then you just go through a number of similar cases, and you just that's your study, right? So you can pause it and go through like an example. Okay, but what I want you to go through is the weaknesses. So the weakness of a case series, okay, is that there is no comparison or control group. So you're not establishing any hypothesis or testing any hypothesis, okay? There is no research question, and it's solely based on interesting observations. So that's a limited take on what this case series are, okay? Cross-sectional studies, again, pause it and read the question, all right? Um, what we're going to look at is this diagram right here. So we're talking about a cross-sectional study. So you take a certain group of people, all right, and that's the cross section of the whole population, okay, and that's where we're doing our studies, okay. So that's what this means. So what's the weakness? It is not possible to distinguish cause and effect because we're not actually determining a causal relationship. All you're doing is just looking at one set of people because of some disease or exposure or need for treatment or something like that, and that's it. Okay, so there's no causal effect taking place here. Inferences are limited to the specific time and are not generalizable to other times. Okay, so as we take this set of people, it also matters that these people are present in a certain time period. Okay, and if they are present in this time period, it cannot be generalized that this will happen in the future as well, or it happened in the past as well. It's just static. Okay, and you may see that there is sampling bias because what you're doing is you're picking out certain individuals from a population, right? You're not randomly picking them. You're picking like going and pinpointing each and every person and then picking them for the study, right? So you introduce is sampling bias. Your portfolio, your patients, your participants, they're not diverse enough, right? So it doesn't accompany the entire characteristics of the population, right? So this is the diagram, right? So exposures are assessed, both determined at the same time, right? And cases and controls are identified. So this is a cross-sectional study, okay? What you do get out of it is something called prevalence ratio, okay? And we'll discuss all of these soon enough, all right? Case control. Um, it's a better study. It's a good study because now you have a control compared to just a case series, right? So now, since you have a control, you can make some comparative causal relations and stuff, right? So what do you do? Yeah, you see cost and time efficient and can study significant number of cases, especially used within rare conditions. Okay. Um, Study is retrospective. Potential sources of bias include confounding factors, selection bias, and recall bias. All of these biases and factors and stuff I'm going to keep discussing over and over. Brief overview. Confounding is basically a middleman that is interfering with both your cause, the cause that you have, and the effect that you have. Again, I'll elaborate more as we go along. Selection bias again is that I'm picking and choosing who I want. Recall bias is them trying to remember stuff, right? So that's what happens in this case. Okay, so case and control. All right. Now, over slash underestimation of association, since sampling relies heavily on outcome. Okay, both exposure and disease have already occurred. So this is what we want to see, right? So you see, um, most of the study is done in the present, but we're trying to recall information from the past, right? This is where the bias comes in, recall bias, because what you will notice is that you remember what what you remember, right? You're not gonna remember anything mundane, or that doesn't pique your interest, or didn't bring any attention to it, right? So people are generally not reliable when it comes to their memory. So you introduce that bias here, right? So this case control study, you see you have the patients with disease and patient without disease, right? And then you like retrospectively ask them what happened, this happened, and conduct a study. And you see case and controls are identified, direction of study is backwards, and exposures are assessed. So this helps us get a relationship between them, okay? And making it difficult to establish a temporal relationship, especially when you're trying to look through the past, right? So now cohort is one of the more important ones. So cohort is a large sample size, right, from a population, and it's conducted in two settings. It can be prospective or it can be retrospective. Retro meaning going back, prospective meaning going front, okay? So you see, you have risk factors, you have no risk factors, and you review your other available records in the present. Okay, so if it's a prospective study, we do like a 5 to 10 year continuous study, and then we find out that during this time period, this person developed this, participant developed this person developed this, and this and that. Then you conclude and find your results and stuff, right? Retrospective is when it's similar to case control, but what you're doing is you go through the records, right? You're not going to ask them any questions or anything, and you take the group of these records, and you find like what risk factors were they exposed to, and then you determine what the disease status is, right? So you're not actually comparing and contrasting them, you're going through data, right? And then you start your assessment and stuff, okay? So you see, cohort. How do you start? Study starts with assessment of exposures. Okay. Direction of inquiry forwards in time, can be backward in retrospective, and study ends with determination of outcomes. Okay. Um, what I suggest, and I will do, is open. Let's open a Gemini. Because it's always difficult. You can go through these examples, right? Like pause it and go through these examples. Okay, this will help you. But take your time, right? Type in, like, I'll show you. Give me examples of different types of clinical studies, right? So once you do this, you're gonna get a lot of examples you can go through, right? So you see, and this is not good, but still, like, train the model and then come back to this, right? So even though you see like some question stems like this, to familiarize yourself properly, go to chat gpt or Gemini, and then just type these things in. Okay, give me examples of case control, give me examples of cohort studies, right? Understand them. Once you can identify them, these questions become so much easier, right? Next, we have randomized control trials. Okay, randomized control trials. You introduce this randomization, and it's called a double-blinded randomized trial, where the 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 one who's conducting and the one who's participating don't know their role. Okay, they're blinded, and both of them are just doing the methodology. Okay, so the goal of randomization is to minimize sampling bias in order to create study groups, and it helps. It's effective. The expensive and inclusion criteria may be limit to generalized ability. So you start with the randomization to minimize bias, and direction of study is forwards, and study ends with determination of outcomes. Okay, right. So these were the main type. Now you come back here, and then you look at the temporal representation of all these studies, right? Cross sectional always takes place in the present. Okay, case series as well takes place in the present. Okay, cohort prospective cohort takes place in the present, goes up to the future, right? Retrospective cohort takes place in the present, but it is including all the data from the past, right? Case control. So what you have is you already have a patient, you already have a case, you have the participants, right? But then you ask them or go through their history, or conduct studies asking them about their past and what happened, right? So it's like looking through an hourglass. Like you're trying to find out what is the relation, what is the some significant finding that is common amongst these cases and these controls, right? In randomized control trial, it follows the prospective cohort. Okay, you will have to go through a lot of examples just to familiarize yourself, because they do try to trick you, right? But once you understand the basis, it's gonna be easy, right? So go through these things, right? So case series we know now, cross sectional, frequency of disease and frequency of risk related factors are assessed. Okay, so what is happening? Case control, you go backwards. So what happened? And cohort, both the questions can be asked, but then you also have looks to see if exposure risk factors associate with later development of disease. So prospective stuff. Okay, now concordance and adoption study. So concordance, just you have these monozygotic or dizygotic twins, right? So the benefit of having a twin is like both of these twins have equal like biological factors, right? Because a person basically who's like a clone of themselves presents with an opportunity to conduct study in one twin and expose or do something with the other twin to see what happens, right? So that's the basis of this, right? So compares the frequency with which both monozygotic or both dizygotic twins develop the same disease. Okay, so let's say, and we're not trying to induce a disease or anything, right? We're not trying to do that. But if there is a genetic association with a disease, right? So let's say in their family there was association of like Alzheimer's or Huntington's and stuff, right? So do I see that the twins have like a higher occurrence of these diseases compared to a normal like non-twin set of individuals who may have like Alzheimer's in their family, right? So it helps me to figure out what the genetic associations between these family histories and genetic backgrounds are. Okay, so it also helps me with doing that. Okay, so measures heritability, right? So this is the genetic influence, right? And the influence of environmental factors, right? So if one twin is exposed to something and the other one is exposed to something, what happens, right? So it helps us to do that. Okay, adoption studies. This is again like a nature versus nurture kind of thing. Let's say I adopt a child and um, well, they came from like a very poor background or something like that, right? But eventually when they do develop in a nice household and they have all their basic amenities and stuff, so what happens? What are the changes? What are the health habits, or what are the different environmental factors that are influencing them, right? So that also becomes a good study option, right? Helps in diagnosing this. And an ecological study compares frequency of disease and frequency of risk related factors across populations, used to monitor mostly populational health, right? So what's happening when I compare like a certain city or a town with another city or a town, right? Something like that. And this should start to make sense now. I don't like the like how it's vertical. I want it horizontal. That's why I picked the other one. But yeah. All right. So what is this clinical therapeutic trial thing now? All right. They have now the first aid has like this really nice diagram. So we'll just go through this. So to get any drug into market, we need to conduct trials, and it's done in 4 phases. And what are those 4 phases, and what are they trying to measure? That's where the question is. Okay. So preclinical stage, you're just formulating the drug and conducting in vitro experiments, meaning within the lab setting experiments. Okay, so these are done on rats or animals or pigs or stuff like that, right? In phase 0, you take a small number of people, and then you measure the pharmacokinetics and dynamics, right? What is the volume of distribution of this? How long does it stay in the body, right? How is it cleared? How all these parameters that determine how the drug behaves inside the body. Okay, that is in phase 0, right? Now next comes the safety assessment. Okay, so now I've understood how the drug interacts with the body. Now I'll see what the drug effects are on the body. So I take a small number of healthy people, okay, but a larger number compared to phase 0, and now I'm going to determine the maximum tolerable dose, right? um, md md50 or something, right? So so this is in phase 1. So I conducted my distribution and stuff like that in phase 0. Now I have my safety in phase 1. Okay, phase 2 is how efficacious is it, right? So if I give it to 10 people, do all the 10 people show these beneficial or harmful effects, right? um, is it how does it interact with different ethnic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, or even like different age groups, right? Different genders. How does it work, right? So this is what you do in phase 2, right? Efficacy assessment provides additional data on short term and adverse effects. So what you use is randomized control, anonymized number of patients, and then a larger study will happen again, and then you compare this to with like the current standard or a placebo in a large number of patients. Okay, so as the amount of patients grow, so you know that this drug is beneficial to at least this set of individuals, and then you can start to have like these market analysis and stuff. Okay, provides data on long-term or rare adverse effects. Can it stay on the market, right? So post-marketing surveillance is during phase 4. So you have approval after phase 3, and phase 4 is when the drug companies start to mass produce stuff, right? So what are all these trials and stuff? Okay, right. So I've given like a couple of examples, right? So let's say we're testing. So you must have seen this thing in options, right? What is a crossover clinical trial? Okay. So imagine two sets of participants. Okay, one are in group A and one are in group B. Okay. So how do I maximize my testing in the minimal amount of time, right? That's my goal. How do I maximize my study in the minimal amount of time and money? Okay. So what they came up with is I expose group A with, like, say, a treatment A or drug A or whatever, right? And then I let them, I conduct my studies and stuff on them, right? While group B gets a second drug or something, right? Or a different set of protocol. Maybe some of them are getting placebo, some of them are not. Okay, so I'm conducting both of these two drugs, drug A, testing both drug A and drug B, or treatment A, treatment B in these two sets of people, right? And after I'm done, I let all of them like let the whole thing wash out of the system. Let's say it is actually a drug, so eventually the system will clear itself of all of the drugs, right? So it varies, and that period of time where we are um, noticing that the entire drug has washed out from the system, that is called the washed out period, right? And it makes sense, right? Because I'm not going to give you drug A and then directly inject drug B, right? It's not going to make any sense, right? Now once this washout period is over with, so the patient is back in their normal healthy state without the drug, right? Now I give them the second drug, right? And then I conduct my study again, and to the other group I give some the first drug, right? So you you have these two drugs and these two sets of patients, and you're conducting the study in the same amount of time, right? You're not prolonging and giving, and having the study side by you're having this study side by side. Okay, right. So that was crossover clinical trials. Make sense of it, right? It's not that hard. Okay, so you have the example here, go through it. All right. Analysis methods. What are the other analysis method? One is this intention to treat. Okay, So this method includes all subjects in the analysis, regardless of whether they complete the treatment or not. So what usually happens is you conduct a study, right? Eventually, some of them might participate throughout the whole thing. Some of them might drop out of the thing, right? So how do you actually make sure your study is credible, right? So this is the type of analysis that we do. So initially, what you do is this type of analysis. Let's say I have 50 participants, and I design a study method or a protocol, right? And I conduct my treatment in or whatever drug or whatever testing in all 50 of them, right? So this will be my analysis, right? Intention to treat. So these are the people I'm going to treat with this protocol, right? So all the subjects in the analysis, that's the keyword, all of them, right? Whether they drop out, whether they stay in, right? Intention to treat. My intention is to treat all of them, okay? So whether they completed the treatment or not, or they switched, or it doesn't matter, okay? Advantage, it reduces bias from dropouts or non-compliance, because I'm accounting for is that even though they drop out, even though they don't, my treatment protocols were there, they dropped out, it's their loss, or we'll see if the study deviates when they if they do drop out, right? May dilute the true effect. Now that's a big problem, because let's say out of 100 people, 5 drop out, that's not a big deal. But eventually if 15 or 20 start to drop out, that's a big deal for a group of 100 patients, right? So that's the big disadvantage, okay? Remember that. As treated is, if a person does drop out, so they dropped out during, let's say, phase 1 of the methodology, right? So I'm only going to analyze them till phase 1. If everyone else can complete it till like phase 4 or something, please don't confuse this with the clinical trials and stuff. I'm just giving you an example, okay? So if a person attended the treatment sessions for a brief amount of time, so they are in the as treated group. If my analysis is in the as treated group, if someone completes the whole course, right? So their as treated is different from this, right? So this method analyzes the data based on the treatment subjects actually received, okay, not what they were originally assigned to. So they might switch over, they might drop out, they might do this, and I'm just going to account for that, and I'm going to write everything down, right? May provide clearer results, which makes sense. Increases the risk of bias, because people who didn't follow the plan perfectly might have different characteristics that influence the outcome, right? So that's a problem, because some of them who are staying might stay for some reason, some of them who drop out might drop out for a certain reason, and what you're doing is just analyzing them and taking it into account, saying that, oh well, this is what I found, but the true reality stays the same, right? You're not actually accurate, right? Per protocol, this method only includes subjects who completed the entire treatment plan, right? So whoever dropped out, I don't care about them, I'm just going to care about who completed it, okay? All of them have their advantages and disadvantages, and this is where we have to like design our studies appropriately, right? Provides the strongest evidence of for the treatment effect, because it means that if everyone who has stayed, who has completed the thing, will show effect or will not show effect, depends on what they found, right? But if they stay, it's good for us. If they drop out, it's bad for us. So let's just not account for them, okay? Highly susceptible to bias, because it excludes subjects who dropped out, who didn't follow the plan, and which might not be representative of the real world. Because I cannot generalize now. The ones who finished, right? Why did they finish? Why did the others drop out? All these answers are important if I want to apply to a larger population, not just limit it to the study, right? Right. So this is the analysis methods. All right. And if you come back here, this is what they're gonna try to say, right? Crossover studies, greater than 2 treatments, you do it simultaneously. Intention to treat, attempts to so all subjects are analyzed according to their original randomly assigned treatment. As treated, right? Increase risk of bias, increase risk of bias, okay? So off-label drug use, just read this, it's nothing big. Bradford Hill criteria. This is a new thing they've added, and I found a way to easily um, remember this. Okay, so we have all of this. All right, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split the screen. So you see Bradford Hill criteria. What is it used for? First of all, okay. So it's used to determine the relationship. The it. Okay, one second. So, a group of principles that provide limited support for establishing evidence of a causal relationship between presumed cause and effect. Okay. So, this set of criteria will help me determine if the cause is actually leading to an effect, right? Or the association between the cause and effect. Okay. So, this will help me to understand that, right? So, to remember all of these, you have to look at the diagrams I've created. Okay. So, number one, strength, right? Strength between cause and effect makes sense, right? If there is greater association, if there's greater evidence, right? So, more the evidence, the more you are prone to link the cause and the effect, right? So, you see, there's a larger arrow, right? Strength. So, this is the cause, right? And this is the effect. So, strength is the larger arrow, all right? This is how I want you to imagine it, right? Consistency. So you see how along different instances of the causes I'm getting the same effect, right? So this is consistency. I have repeated observations finding the in multiple distinct samples, right? Okay, so that is consistency, right? Specificity. So is this cause causing the effect I need, right? So you see how cause A is leading to effect A, but it's not leading to effect B, right? So remember that specificity, right? The more specific the presumed cause is to the effect, the stronger the evidence for causation, right? Because you can imagine if it's not specific, right? If it's not specific, then it's a generalized variable, right? Um, One example of that would be like, you know how sunlight is needed for like vitamin D and stuff, right? So I can say that the cause, which is like lack of sun exposure in old females, is leading to bone fractures, right? Even though there is a cause and effect relationship present, right? But the specificity is not defined yet, right? I still need to define that, yes, vitamin D and all of this and all the pathways and stuff, right? So that is what this specificity actually indicates. Okay. Temporality. The presumed cause precedes the effect by an expected amount of time, and you see how I've represented it. You see how cause is leading to effect in a certain time period, right? Time period named T. So that is the temporality. Okay. Biological gradient. So greater effect observed with greater exposure, right, to the presumed cause. Dose response relationship, right? So you see how as cause is increasing, the effect is also increasing, right? Make sense? Or cause is decreasing and effect is decreasing. So it's a like a proportional effect. Okay. Plausibility. A conceivable mechanism exists by which the cause may lead to an effect, right? So, as I said, with the mechanism of like sun exposure and bone fractures, now I know there is actual mechanism, right? So that is the plausibility section of this criteria. Okay. So you see how I've made an arrow and put under like a check mark underneath it, making sure that there is a underlying mechanism that is leading to the effect, right? Now the rest of the other criteria, you see, you have coherence, experiment, and analogy. All of them are related to like um, consensus and like scientific literature and stuff like that. So they are not actually direct relationship, but it's due to like what we've learned before and what we're assuming now, right? So coherence, the presumed cause and effect do not conflict with existing scientific consensus. Okay. So because existing scientific consensus allows us to build foundations and like extrapolate on top of them, right? But if this is some random idea who has no credibility, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's what coherence means here. Okay, experiment, empirical evidence supporting the presumed cause and effect, right? So you have evidence of what you're trying to prove, or like at least a defined mechanism, right? That falls into plausibility. This falls into experiment, falls into evidence, right? An analogy is the presumed cause and effect are comparable to a similar established cause and effect. So you see both of these, like this scientific consensus and this cause and effect and this empirical, these are both more likely um, like a study, and how you conduct the study and your research and stuff like that, right? So how do you remember them? So existing consensus, you remember these keywords: existing consensus, you will remember coherence. Okay, experiment, empirical evidence. Okay, analogy, it's comparable to something. Okay, so if you how do you remember all of this? Let me just zoom out and take a look at this again. All right, or draw it for yourselves and help you remember it. So we have all of these, right? Go through all of them, and it should help you at least manage this part, because this is a recent thing. I didn't see it in the time I was giving it, but it seems like something people can easily get confused in. All right. So that was Bradford Hill criteria. Now, before going into this section, what I am going to go into is right here. I'm going to revise all the biases now. All right. So what you see is you have because and these biases, they're not just including like human biases. They also account for biases like study design bias and how we conduct studies and stuff. Okay, so how do you divide them and try to understand them? So you see, you have biases that are even before the study is conducted. Okay, you have biases that were during the study, right? And you have biases that are after the study, right? So this is the main criteria how we are going to try to remember them. All right, so let me open up the first aid page. Right, so you see selection bias, and this makes sense, right? If I pick everyone who I feel that it should be in the study, the study is not credible, right? So selection bias, let's choose the people we want, right? Let's choose these people. All right. Selection bias contains Bergson's bias or the bedside. It's the same thing, Bergson's bias or slash bedside bias. And what does that mean? It's basic. Bergson bias is basically that I'm choosing the patients compared to normal participants as well, right? Because patients have more like they're more prone to disease. They're more the environmental risk factors that may surround them are different, right? The hospital or their care and stuff, it matters a lot. The drug regimens and stuff they are on matters a lot, right? So if someone is just picking patients and not even considering the normal participants, they are introducing Bergson's bias. Okay, next is the attrition bias. That is a part of the selection bias as well. Okay, attrition bias, and this correlates with something called as treated analysis, and what we saw above, right? So attrition bias is the participants that are lost, right? So we have not considered why are they leaving, right? And as they leave, and we just change our analysis method, and we say, okay, now we're gonna do as treated analysis, but we never made sure that why they left or what effect that them leaving actually had on our result, right? So this is selection bias, and you can go through it. This should make sense now. Okay, convenience sampling is basically, you just want to relax and you just want to like take it easy, and you just call the first 100 people you have on your phone, right? So that's the enrollment bias, okay, or convenience bias. So how do you deal with this? You have to randomize. So that's the main thing. This will come up over and over. Randomize, okay. Ensure the choice of the right comparison slash reference group. Makes sense. I just have to fix my the people I choose, right? Performing the study. So during the study, I have four types of biases. Okay. So during the study, what do I have? Recall bias. What is recall bias? What I do remember, I remember well. This is the best way. I like you throughout this the my notes here. You're gonna find like a lot of ways to help you remember this. Okay. So what I do remember, I remember well, right? So if I had, because I'll give you an example. Um, I read a research paper that found an association with like aluminum exposure and Alzheimer's. Okay, that's what I found. And since then, I realized that a lot of deodorants and stuff, they have a lot of aluminum salts in them to like neutralize or like decrease the amount of perspiration, right? So now I remember that. Okay, I'll never forget that. So if I enroll in a study and they ask me like, do you use deodorants and stuff like that, I'll be like, yeah, 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 of course. And um, have you had it? Or let's say eventually I have some like neurocognitive disorders and stuff. I will point out that I use deodorants and stuff. And the one who's conducting the study, they will also think like, oh, you know what? Oh, so deodorants can lead to like heavy use of deodorants can lead to Alzheimer's, right? And if 100 people say the same thing, you have concluded the study with a positive result, right? So whatever people do remember, they remember well, and they just reiterate that those things, right? What they don't remember, it also matters, right? So if they don't remember, like especially mundane stuff, like they don't remember eating steak and red steak and wine like every day for the past 10 years or something, right? Because it's their habit, they might not even tell you, right? It's up to us as the study conductor to deal with that, right? That is recall bias. Measurement bias. I don't know what I'm doing, and it makes sense, right? If the whole study design is not done properly, it's not organized, it's not the data you're inputting is not correct, right? The methodologies you're following are not correct. You're fumbling the results. You're fumbling the the protocols and stuff, right? Measurement bias, straight up. A subset of this bias is the Hawthorne bias, right? So let's, yeah, and this is the best example is that if you remember, if you have ever given an exam in like an exam hall, if the invigilator walks up to you or just stands next to you, right? They say I'm watching you, right? They say I'm watching you, and what do? You freeze up, you try to think a lot more, right? Stuff like that. That's the Hawthorne bias. So under supervision, the patients or the participants start to act differently. They might be more hygienic. They might follow like sleep early, eat well, right? They might start to do these things unknowingly, right? So that's a bias as well, called the Hawthorne bias, right? I'm watching you. Remember that. Best way, if you want to remember it, hawk, right? The hawk, Hawthorne. Hawk always is watching you or something, right? Procedure bias. All of you are different for me. So, come back here. Procedure. Subjects in different groups are not treated the same. Why? You should treat them the same, but because either like the conductor already knows like something about this set of people or a set of participants that um, and starts to like behave differently, right? Let's say a set of individuals are on placebo. He might not pay attention to them, and he already recognizes that these set of individuals are actually have a like an actual positive effect. So he might start to act differently when it comes to them. So these different groups are having different experiences, right? So how do you fix that? You blind them. You just put like like you just put a mask on them and they just blind them, right? And they won't be able to see anymore. So you will reduce the procedure bias. Okay. Observer slash expectancy bias. Okay. So it's what you see is, let's say you see what I've written here. There's too much at stake, right? So the person who's conducting the study is like, I need a positive result. I really need it. There's too much at stake. There's too much money involved. There's too much, like, I'm spending too much energy, too much time on this. And you know what? I expect some results. And once they start to expect some result, they start to consciously, subconsciously act in that way, right? So that's the observer expectancy bias, right? And what does it say? Researchers' belief in the efficacy of the treatment leads to this, and it's also got the Pygmalion effect. Okay, what you need to do is dissociate, right? Blind the study conductor and the participants and stuff, and you have to like use anonymity and stuff to make sure you're not involving yourself in these studies more than you need to, right? Then you can decrease this bias, right? So you see Hawthorne here, and what do? Use the standardized methods of like exact methodologies and stuff, right? Use the placebo group when needed, right? So that was during the study. Now you have interpreting results, right? So go through the stuff like this I've written, right? It'll help you remember things because it's so intuitive. Like selection bias, let's choose these people. Recall bias, what I do remember, I remember well. Measurement bias, I don't know what I'm doing. Hawthorne, I'm watching you. Procedure bias, all of you are different from me. You're not the same, right? Observer expectancy bias, there's too much at stake, right? Now, after the study is conducted, you still need to follow up with the patients and stuff, right? So, what you see is, um, if you have like a disease, or like a effective test against a certain disease, right? So let's say, and it's a chronic disease. So the earlier I detect the disease, what I start to mistake it for is the how uh, long the survival time is for that patient, right? For example, if a patient is diagnosed with a lung cancer, right, and I detect it early, right? So let's say it developed right now, and I detected it coincidentally or incidentally by like a month later, right? Now, if it's a malignant tumor, it will take a few years, and eventually the patient will like die if there is no treatment, right? But what I've introduced myself here is that since I detected it in just a month, all of that time that passed after my detection, I'm determining, I'm labeling that time as a survival time, and that's not good because that doesn't indicate the severity or the characteristic of the disease, right? If he had a grade 4 tumor and I detected it early, right? I'll say that all the grade 4 tumors last for, I don't know, 4 years or 2 years or less than a year, right? And I came up with that generalized statement. But the fact was that I detected it early. If I detected it late, it doesn't make sense anymore. Why did this person die in a month and that person lived for 2 years, right? That is the lead time bias. Now, length time bias. So what happens is you have like acute forms of disease and chronic forms of disease, right? So in a long disease, you have higher chances of detection of that disease because let's say a person suffers from colorectal carcinoma, right? It's recommended that you do a colonoscopy and then 10 years later you do a one, or if there's risk factors you do at 5 years or something like that, right? So there's because it's indolent, I will still have higher chances of detection, right? They might come in more often, or they might show some symptoms and changes and stuff like that. So I have more opportunities to detect as well. But in a shorter disease where it's just quick, right? And it's so quick, in fact, that they might not even know what's happening, and or some adverse effect happens, and they just died or something, right? So you have lower chances of detection during a short disease, okay? And that's a bias as well. So now read this. Early detection interpreted as increased survival, but the disease course has not changed, right? Breast cancer diagnosed early by mammography and may appear to exaggerate survival, but it doesn't actually reflect that. Measure the back end survival. Adjust survival according to the severity of the disease. This is important, right? Back end survival. What does that mean? It means that after post detection, right? Or actually grade the tumor and then determine the survival chances or rate, right? Length time bias. Screening tests detect diseases with longer latency period, right? A slow progressive cancer is more likely to be detected, right? Why? Because even if it's slow growing, there's more opportunities, there are more chances of them coming into like a GP or something, right? A randomized control trial assigning subjects to the screening program or to no screening. Okay, so what you need to do is make sure you randomize the setting, right? And yeah, so the screening program is randomized, or to just no screening, just go to the study. Now, confounding and effect modification. A lot of people get confused on this thing. Okay, right. So let me open up. Yeah. So yeah, if you wanna pause and you wanna read through these cases and stuff, I recommend you do so. All right. So this was the selection bias, right? Phases of clinical trial. We went almost through everything. Selection bias, all right, and discussion is fine. Recall bias. Now you understand this. Just read through it, okay? Understand what we're trying to say. Discussion may tend to think about possible causes of the outcome, right? So they're more likely to remember their previous exposures. Differential recall, so they don't exactly know what they're recalling. Measurement bias, Hawthorne effect, actions if they know they're being observed. Lead time bias, read this, okay? Lead time bias, you see, so this is the indolent part of the disease, right? Occult. So we don't know the disease was there. And I screened it here, and overt disease happened after this, right? So symptom positive, screen positive, right? So the difference between these two, right? Like when I actually start to see the actual symptoms and the difference, and when I actually had the screening, right? So the screen was done here, right? And after all of this, I see that the survival period has increased, but in fact the progression of the disease is just normal. It hasn't been changed, right? Length time bias, you see the case, and then you come at the diagram, right? So these are rapidly growing tumors. You see there's less chances because the patients are just dying. And slow growing tumors, you see they're slow. So if this was the screen test they were supposed to reach, they reached, but the slow ones they just couldn't, right? And you'll see this sort of diagram in a lot of places, right? So evaluation of test results, let me go to confounding and stuff. Okay, it might not be here. All right, let's just look at it through here. So confounding and effect modification. um, this is best understood when we learn like the null hypothesis and variables and stuff like that. I'll come back to this then as well. But what we have to determine right now, right, is we are looking at, this is what we're looking at, okay? So let's say I conduct a study where I'm looking at drinking coffee and association between drinking coffee and lung cancer, okay? So before that, let me introduce something. So there's something called variables, okay? So variables are some unknowns, right? Or the things that I'm going to study, right? So those are variables. Now there's different types of variables. So you must have heard of categorical and quantitative and stuff like that, right? So similarly, there's independent and dependent variables, okay? Independent variables are the causes, okay? So whenever I say cause now, try to associate that with independent variables, okay? And dependent variables are the effects. And it makes sense. The effect is dependent on the cause, right? So effect or dependent variables are the effect, okay? So whenever I say what is my independent and dependent variable in this case, so this is my independent variable and this is my dependent variable, Okay. Now, confounding is interesting because it can affect both the independent variable and the dependent variable. Right? Remember that. So in this, what happens is you have a third party, a middleman or something like that, that is causing, that is affecting the both the independent, which is the cause, and the effect, right? So you see how can in this case, what's the best way to imagine this? Let's say a smoker likes to enjoy their morning coffee with a smoke, right? So that behavior is affecting my independent variable, right? A smoker relaxing in the morning with a cup of coffee or even tea or something, right? So that is affecting my independent variable. But now I see that the smoker develops a lung cancer, right? So that smoking has led to lung cancer, right? So it's affected my dependent variable as well. So now you understand that this it's a third party. A confounder is basically a third party factor that affects my variable, like the independent and dependent variable, and it's creates this like triangle kind of thing, right? So this is what the whole talk is going to be about, right? So you see, drinking coffee can lead to lung cancer. So this is what they have come up with, right? This is their hypothesis. But when you actually break down that sentiment, right? You break down that um, the reasoning. So you see, drinking coffee, if smokers drink coffee, it leads to lung cancer. But if non-smokers drink coffee, it leads to lung cancer. And now it doesn't make any actual sense. Why am I seeing that non-smokers who are drinking coffee are having lung cancer? There must be some other reason, right? So confounding is the problem, and stratified analysis is the solution, right? Right. So now you read this: factors related to both exposure, okay, which is the cause, which is the independent variable, and the outcome, which is the effect, which is the dependent variable, right? Distorts the effect on outcome. Makes sense, right? Now this third party, this triangle that is formed, is causing everything to go haywire, right? And I don't understand it. I just came up with A to B, but the C is leading to the actual breakdown of like the cause, right? So no true association actually exists between A and B. It was through C. So that was the confounder, okay? And another example of this, let me show you. So you see, confounding is like a sneaky party crasher and stuff, and they're changing the variable, a factor that can change, and the exposure and stuff like that. Okay, you can read this. Um, you want to see if drinking orange juice helps prevent cold. Okay, you survey people and find those who drink more orange juice seem to get fewer colds. Great, right? Maybe orange juice really is a cold fighter. But wait, the confounder is that, let's say, people who drink more orange juice also tend to eat healthier overall, and you didn't consider that, right? What we should consider that, and how do you combat that sort of behavior? You stratify it. You break down that reasoning. You create layers where, oh, okay, so this variable is affecting this part of the flow, this part of the logic, right? So that's the stratification is a way to alleviate that, right? Eating healthier can also make you less likely to get sick, right? So what really happened? Another example, okay? You study if playing video games leads to violence, right? Kids who play more video games seems more aggressive, right? That's my general theory, okay? That's my hypothesis. But what is the confounder? Maybe kids who are playing more prone to aggression are also drawn to playing video games more often. Or another confounder can be, let's say, children who play more video games have more of a like a hostile home environment or something, right? Or they're neglected or something like that, right? And once that happens, you see aggression occurs. So you see how I've created this layer of reasoning. All right, that is what stratification is. All right. Key points to remember: it's a hidden variable that affects both the thing you're studying and the outcome. Okay, independent variable, dependent variable. Say it more and more so you understand it. Okay, it can make it seem like there is a connection when there actually isn't. There is no connection between A and B. It was through C, but you didn't see C. That's a pun. Researchers try to identify and account for potential confounders to get more accurate results. Okay, that is confounding. I hope you never forget what confounding is anymore. Okay, go through the example. Now, strategies to reduce bias, crossover studies, right? So, when we were doing this crossover study, we saw that one group was the case, the other group maybe received a placebo or something. They served as control, right? So we had like this compare and contrast kind of thing. That reduces the chance of actually introducing confounders, because you see that you can make uh, you can make out the actual defects in reasoning when you see this compare and contrast. Okay, and that's what they mean to say. So when you use crossover studies, the effect of confounders is decreased, because I'm looking and comparing and contrasting between the controls and the actual like treatment receiving individuals or something, right? So with subjects as their own controls, right? Matching patients with similar characteristics in both treatment and control groups. How does matching help? So if I match the exact set of like a demographics of the patient to my treatment and stuff, I am trying to reduce those set of confounders that may be present in like different groups of individuals. Okay, although it's not good for randomization, but if I make sure I reduce my confounding first, I can later on like reduce my randomization. But if my reasoning, if my whole hypothesis is based on uh, based on like fallacies and stuff, right, is based on this confounding principles, right, which I have not identified, then my whole study is going to be wrecked. You understand that, right? So I have to first make sure that my reasoning and all of these variables are accounted for. Okay. Analytic techniques, example for regression analysis. Okay. So in the case of like the video games and let's say the video games leading to aggression, right? If I found out that there is actual one-to-one relationship, right? If there was actually positive one-to-one relationship, right? That gives me enough evidence to to confirm that, okay, you know what, this actually happens. So I've reduced my confounding like error overall. Okay, so this regression analysis, also called like linear regression or logistic regression and stuff like that, they will help you measure, like quantify, right? If you give them the data you have found it and you put the set of formulas into the program and stuff, the program will spit out the value, right? The graph value, and it will tell you, you know what, there is an actual correlation. Okay, there is an actual relationship between these two independent and dependent variables. Okay, that's what analytic techniques do, right? So stratification was the reasoning and stuff, right? You found the association, and what else can you do in your studies to reduce this bias? You do crossover studies, or you do matching, or you do analytic techniques. Now all of this has to be differentiated in your head. Like if you see these in options, right, you have to differentiate it in your head. Okay, that's the main problem that people face, is that if they put confounding and effect modification in the same set of options, they're confused, they don't know what to do, right? And if they put crossover studies, matching, analytic techniques, or stratified analysis in one group, they don't know how to differentiate amongst the thing. I don't know the question, but I'm just like showing you what they can do, right? So now you understand confounding. Okay, effect modification. So effect modification is the exposure leads to a different outcome in subgroups stratified by factor. True association actually exists. So what we're seeing here is that the independent variable is affected, right, due to some modifier. So there was a confounder here, right? But here you have a modifier, and this modifier is modifying the independent variable and causing different results and outcomes to occur, or like you're reaching certain different dependent variables, right? So this is what effect modification is. Look at the example, right? A study among women using OCP shows significant risk of DVT, right? But when these data were stratified by smoking habits, there was a very strong association between smoking and OCP use with DVT, but there was no association between OCP and DVT in people who do not smoke. So you see how OCP was the thing we were looking at, but the modifier has caused the result to actually like be like wrong, right? So it was the smoking that was the modifier, right? Smoking through OCP use led to DVT in this study or in this example. In reality, smoking in general is also associated, and OCP use is also associated. Okay, so smoking plus OCP led to DVT, right? So the modifier modified the smoking, the independent variable, and made the dependent variable. Okay, so how do you break it down again? So here you see stratified analysis here. So you see smokers OCP use, you have a very strong relationship between DVT, but non-smokers and OCP use you have minimal or no effect, right? Here you I think in confounding you don't use stratified because this makes more sense, right? So smokers, so if you stratify this based on like the arguments, what happens is you have smokers who drink coffee, you have no association. You have non-smokers who drink coffee, there's no association. So but you have, if you want to actually prove this, right, a confounder must have been present, right? But in direct studies, in stratified studies you might not find it. Okay, so stratified analysis, that is after testing for interaction between OCP and smoking, analyze risk amongst smokers and non-smokers. All right, so let's look at this. Let's look at some examples. Okay, so you're studying the effect of exercise on weight loss. You find that exercise generally helps people lose weight, but then you consider the modifier. So what is the modifier? Age. Younger people exercise more, older people don't, right? And for younger adults, the weight drop and stuff, here's the key: exercise still helps with weight loss in both groups, but age modifies the strength of the effect. So you see how because of one modifier I'm having differential effects, right? Or I'm having same effects, but the association of the cause and effect is changed, right? Compare and contrast confounders and effect modifiers over and over. But the reasoning that I've said, right? How confounders affect both independent and dependent variables, how effect modification or modifiers only affect the independent variables, right? And the association between those cause and effect. Okay, another one, this one, right? Your research is, yeah, your research if taking vitamin D supplements helps prevent getting sick, overall vitamin D might show a slight benefit, right? So getting sick, not bone health, but it's just getting sick. So the potential modifier in this case could be amount of sunlight exposure can influence the effect of vitamin D supplements, right? So if I have higher levels of exposure, if someone who works outside, who is like a blue collar worker or something like that, they might show a more effect. Whereas someone who works in the office, never goes out, or has late nights and stuff like that, they might not even have that exposure. And they might, you might classify them and say that, oh, no association occurs, right? So this thing matters. Okay, effect modification and confounders. All right, again, go through like ChatGPT and Gemini and find multiple examples. It'll help you understand more and more. You just have OCP and DVT and stuff here, but you see, um, stuff like this will help you visualize it. Okay, all right, so next thing, let me just see what the next thing is. All right, now we're here. Let me start this in the next video.